completely spiritual. And for doctors who came and went with their medicines and prescriptions, it was incomprehensible. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So CC. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktarinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Caitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhaktarinda. Reading from the Caitanya Charitamrita. This is Madhya Lila, Volume 4, Chapter 18. And his text 110. 110 and 11. Okay. To understand through the Bengali, Vrindavanehi oila tumi Krishna avatar toma deki savaloka haila nishta. The people then said, you have appeared in Vrindavan as an incarnation of Krishna. Just by seeing you, everyone is now liberated. So we'll go through the Bengali. Prabhu kahe Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba. Prabhu kahi Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba. Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabu na Kariba. Jivadame Krishna Jivana Kabu na Kariba. Prabhu kahi Vishnu Vishnu ina kahiba. Jivadame Krishna Jivana Kabu na Kariba. Prabhu kahi Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba. Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabu na Kariba.
Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabuna Kariba. Prabhu kahe Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba. Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabuna Kariba. Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabuna Kariba. Prabhu kahe Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba. Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabuna Kariba. Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabuna Kariba.
Prabhu kahe Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba.
Vishnu Vishnu iha na kahiba.
Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabuna Kariba.
Jivadame Krishna Jnana Kabu na Kariba. Prabhu kahe. Sri Caitanya Mahaprabhu replied, Vishnu Vishnu. Oh, Vishnu Vishnu. Iha. This. Na kahiba. Do not speak. Jiva Adame. Fallen conditioned souls. Krishna Jnana. Accepting Lord Krishna. Kabu, ever. Nakariba, do not do. Translation. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately exclaimed, Vishnu, Vishnu, do not call me the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A jiva cannot become Krishna at any time. Do not even say such a thing. So, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately exclaimed, Vishnu, Vishnu, do not call me the Supreme Personality of Godhead. A jiva cannot become Krishna at any time. Do not even say such a thing. Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu immediately stated that a living being, however exalted he may be, should never be compared to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. All of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's preaching protests the monistic philosophy of the Mayavad school. The central point of Krishna consciousness is that the jiva, the living entity, can never be accepted as Krishna or Vishnu. This viewpoint is elaborated in the following verses. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Malitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhastam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupida Mayam Tadati Swavadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So Lord Chaitanya, although he is Vishnu, he doesn't want to be regarded as Vishnu because he's come down in the role of the Lord's devotee. So he's showing everybody how to serve Krishna, not how to be Krishna. So he's setting this example to avoid in the future. There's so many cheap incarnations. There was one incarnation, he had a false set of arms, and he was challenging Krishna that you should give up your symbols and surrender to me immediately, and I'll take care of you, do not fear. So Krishna and the Yadus were laughing for a considerable time. Eventually they confronted each other, and of course he was defeated. So that was happening then even when Krishna was actually here on the planet doing all kinds of amazing things like lifting Govardhan Hill. I mean, if somebody thinks that they're God, then surely they'd be wondering why they couldn't lift Govardhan Hill. You'd be thinking, wouldn't you? You'd think that would cross their minds. If I can do anything, maybe I can do that. And then sometimes they do that theme, they do a film and they have the theme where a person gets to play God. He's God for 24 hours. And it's very problematic, a lot more complicated and difficult than initially they'd thought, you know. There's two particular references to the distinction between a living entity and God in the beginning of the Bhagavatam. Am Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janma Jajaydhan Veritas Chitesvi got Swarat. Swarat is that he's independent. He could walk up to a cliff and then walk mid-air and he wouldn't have to fall because the laws don't apply. So he can completely disregard any laws. So he's Swarat, independent. And he's Abhigya, and Abhigya means he's cognizant of everything. Cognizant of everything happening right now, cognizant of everything that's happened, and cognizant of everything that's going to happen in the future. Which is amazing, isn't it, to think how you could accommodate that amount of information. Aware of every single, not only moving living entity, but every particle. Krishna is present in every particle. And he's aware of everything that is to be, is, and was, all simultaneously at the same time. So that's amazing. So if you're thinking you're God, you could just check yourself. You could go to a God clinic and just say, I'm really feeling like I'm God. Could you do a few tests on me? And they'll say, okay, we'll try lifting that hill. I don't think I could manage that. Mm-hmm. What were you doing 13 years ago? I'm not quite sure. What do you think you'll be doing in 10 years from now? Well, that's a tough one. Okay, you're probably not God. Okay, thanks a lot. You can leave the clinic. I don't know what came over me. I thought it was God for a second. Of course, it's easy to think that you're God if God just has to play football really well, or just has to be a really good singer, or be really attractive, or really rich. Then you could have a really watered down, cheap. So then you can have lots of cheap gods, and they'll all be competing for the position, which is what we're all doing, really. We're all trying to be cheap gods. They call them tin gods. Don't try to play tin god. So the reason we're here in the first place in the material world is because we wanted to be Krishna. The problem is there's competition. Everyone's trying to be Krishna as well. We're not just being Krishna on our own. The very first chance we get to be Krishna, Krishna says, okay, look, you can have a whole universe and just look after it. So the first position for the living entity when he falls is Lord Brahma, and then he can be God. The problem is if Lord Brahma becomes attached to his creation, then he has to take birth as every species in the creation. And that's how we end up here. So even though we may not consciously be going around saying I'm God, we may be still thinking that we can control things. And the benefits of thinking you're the controller are that when things go well, then you feel really good about yourself. But the downside, the high price you have to pay, is that when things go wrong, then you have to accept that it's your fault. So that's the price. You want to play God, okay, you get the credit, but then when it goes wrong, then you also get the blame. So if you don't want the blame, then just remember that Krishna's in control all the time. Of course, we try to do everything that we can, but ultimately we understand that it's up to Krishna. Only by the grace of Krishna, anything takes place. It's only by the grace of Krishna that you can become free from the idea that you're God as well. That's our false ego. And the real ego is that we're not, that we're the servant. So they're diametrically opposed. So sometimes there can be a conflict for young devotees as they're trying to be one thing. We were just doing a course with Mahatma last night. He says you can have contradictory emotions. So you could have an emotion that you really want to be humble and really like to be so humble. But at the same time, you can have another emotion that you'd like to be really important. So you've got contradictory emotions going on. You're being pulled this way, like this, and you're also wanting to go that way, like that. So you have different things pulling away at you. So dealing with your emotions and aligning your emotions so that when you're chanting, you're not trying to reinforce your false ego. There's a book coming out soon by Mahaprabhu called 32 Different Ways Not to Chant Japa. And one of the first ones is, I am right Japa. You're chanting your Japa and something just happened. And you're getting all the information together about how you're right and this person's wrong that you've had an argument with. So you spend your whole Japa thinking about how you're right. And then at the end of the Japa, you've got a really, really reinforced false ego. You haven't tasted the nectar of the holy name at all. If you're chanting good Japa, then generally what happens when you're chanting good Japa, you start off thinking you're right, and at the end of the Japa, you start thinking you're wrong. That's when you know you've done some good Japa, because you start thinking, oh, he's got a point actually. And I didn't look at it like that. And I didn't take that into consideration. And now that I'm thinking it from his point of view, and then you know that Krishna's coming in and he's helping you to turn yourself around so that you can align with real... it's interesting, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he gave around 20 gems of statements which are like really, really powerful, that his disciples really cherished. And one of them was, do not let the faults of others delude and misguide you. Be patient, introspect, and find fault with yourself. Nobody can harm you unless you harm yourself. It's interesting because what he's saying is when you find fault in others, that's when you harm yourself. And when you find fault with yourself, that's actually when you're protecting yourself from any harm. You don't want to make any offense to anybody, and you're focused more on the work that you've got to do on yourself. And the interesting thing about finding fault in somebody is it immediately takes the pressure off you. If you see somebody do something that you would never do, and then you start fault finding, I would never do that. Okay, maybe you would never do that, but maybe there are things that you do that he would never do. So why don't you just look at those and deal with them, you know? Because by finding fault in others and thinking badly of them, it doesn't help you at all. And it doesn't help the person you're thinking badly of either. In fact, they say that if you meditate on a person's faults, in due course of time, you develop the same faults. Because you're cultivating them, you see, you're cultivating the meditation, and you're thinking, he's so greedy, look at him, the way he's eating, and then before you know it, you're eating 3 times what you normally eat. Anyway, these are all like subdivisions of the tendency to listen to the false ego. And the ultimate expression of the false ego is that I am God. So Lord Caitanya is setting the example of humility, the humble servant. And he's helping safeguard us against that. And also we should become sufficiently educated that we can distinguish for people in general, well, okay, he can sing a really nice song, but that doesn't really mean he's God. I mean, has he produced any universes recently? No, it's coming out soon. He after his last album, he said he's going to create a universe. Oh yeah, okay, let's see it then. There was one singer, he actually put on his record cover, his face is the universal form. He had his face all over, So he's trying to kind of insinuate that he was more than the average person. So we're all average souls, actually. We shouldn't see ourselves as anything special. We should try to appreciate others. So Lord Caitanya is saying that, and establishing the difference between Jiva Tattva, and Vishnu Tattva. And setting the example for us so that we don't. And unfortunately, even though Lord Caitanya was very strong and set the example, it didn't deter a lot of people still from deciding that this person was an incarnation or that they were an incarnation. So you can imagine how much worse it would have been if he'd have said, okay, you're right, I'm actually Vishnu. But if you hear, I'm listening to Caitanya Bhagavat recently, and sometimes Lord Caitanya would be very assertive and he would say, I am him. I am the person you are worshipping. And then sometimes he would say he wasn't, Anyway, in this instance, he is definitely making the point. The central point of Krishna consciousness is that the jiva, the living entity, can never be accepted as Krishna or Vishnu. Any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu.
There's a very good, I heard it from, so there was someone over the event for years, and there were a lot of people in the US, and then there were a lot of people sitting, some people were quite eager to talk to him and get some blessing. So one of the guy, he was actually surrounding around the Prabhupada. And the Prabhupada thought, okay, he is trying to ask me something. So Prabhupada, he went there and Prabhupada called him and he asked him, do you want to be a god? And then he became quite surprised. He said, yeah, why not? He said, yes, please make me God. So what does this mean? Do you want to be God? So he said, yeah, please make me. If you can, because he thought that actually he is asking, he's a big Swami, he's asking, he might make the God also. So if you wish to be God, it means that the God can occur. You can't be a God if you want to be a God, because God can't occur if you wish to even thought about it. It's not like actually you pray someday and become God.
Yeah, you may have a desire. In fact, it's compared to a child goes to his mother and says, "I'd like the moon," and so the mother wants to satisfy the child, by fulfilling its desire. So she tries to explain to the child that it's too big. If you try and hold the moon, it'll crush you. But the child is being very unreasonable. No, and he starts throwing a tantrum. Give me the moon. Do you love me? You're my mother. Yes, I love you. Well, then give me the moon. So then the mother gives the child a mirror, and when the child looks in the mirror, it sees the moon, and then the child is, oh, thank you so much. So he gets a reflection of the moon. So Krishna is like, well, you can't really be God, that's my position and not yours, but I can give you a reflection of it.
Thank you, God. You see, I've heard Prabhupada say a lot that the last snare of Maya is this idea.
Yeah.
So, how is it, but as we progress in spiritual life and we're trying to, get free from Maya, then, this becomes more and more of a danger. This idea that we're going to see so many examples throughout history, and the rest of personality power and whatnot, and corruption and these sort of things. They're the ones who are doing it. So how to sort of, I guess there's two questions. Like, why is it like that? Why is it the more spiritual progress you make, the more you can get deluded by thinking we're God, and also how to sort of protect against that?
Yeah, it would seem, it's counterintuitive. You would think, well, the more advancement I make, then surely the further away I am from thinking such a kind of a preposterous thing. You would think that. And because nobody in the beginning would want to do that, then the next question would be, well, how do I safeguard? If it can happen to anyone, then it can happen to me. And there's many stalwart devotees, much more advanced than I have, that have fallen prey to this tendency to think that they are God, that they're independent of rules and regulations, and they can do what they want, when they want, to who they want, and say what they want. So how can I safeguard against that? So it is, as you go on in spiritual life, it becomes more and more, the road that we tread to begin with is very wide. And as you go on and gain more knowledge, then Krishna expects more from you to act in a more responsible way. So that then the edge becomes very fine, until eventually it's just the thickness of a razor. And so then you have to be very, very careful, tread very carefully. So that is the way it is. Krishna is expecting a very high level of credibility, accountability, and consciousness of what should and should not be done. We are safeguarded if we're in a society. It's much more difficult on our own, but in a society, then by being in amongst others that we can get feedback from. And also we learn sometimes by others' mistakes. We learn by how others set a good example, and we also learn by how others set a bad example. And when they set a bad example, usually it starts with something very innocent, and it leads to something else. And then usually we can think, okay, I'm not going to even do that, although there doesn't seem to be that much harm in it, because it could lead to this, which could lead to that, which could lead to the next thing, you see. So one of there's 6 forms of unsteady devotional service, Madhuri Kandamini Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur explains, and one of them is called Taranga Ranjani. And Taranga Ranjani is that when you become a little bit cool, you start putting your woolly hat on straight, and you've got your dhoti neat, and you know a few slokas, and you can make kittery, and you're thinking, I'm a pretty cool guy, actually. Maybe I should round up a few followers on Facebook, and get a really cool profile picture of myself. And so you become a bit adept at manipulating the material energy and controlling your senses and talking and being charismatic, and then people become enamored, and then you become enamored by them, and you're thinking, I'm pretty cool, actually. And then when you think like that, then you stop giving Krishna credit. And the king had a little flea on his knee, and all the people were like this to the king. The curtains opened, and all the people were like that. And the flea thought that they were doing it to him, so the flea was like this. It was nothing. And then to really enjoy it, he thought, I'll just sit down and enjoy this. And as he sat down, he had a little spike in his bottom, So as he went to sit down, he pricked the king's knee, and the king went. And that was the end of the flea. So Taranga Ranjani is the devotional service becomes unsteady because we want to now enjoy, because we're getting out of the material energy, and we have a certain amount of potency, a certain amount of Shakti, and then that can draw attraction from others. So we have to safeguard against that. If you're leading a very renounced life as well, and you're very controlled, then you become very attractive, you glow. People that lead very sinful lives, they are not so attractive. They have like kind of a grayness to them and a gloominess to them. It's not so appealing. But you see, when you see devotees on Harinam, they look very bright and cheerful, and it's very attractive, you know. So as long as you always remember that this glow, this Krishna conscious glow, I'm getting it from Krishna. And as soon as I go away from Krishna, I'll be in the cold again, and I'll lose that glow. Because it's a quality that people don't have. Even famous, you know, tennis players and far out actors and great people that are famous, the one thing they don't have is purity. And it's a very attractive quality to meet someone that's pure, that's free of the false ego. It's a very unusual quality that's seen very rarely, you know. And people are so much wanting to be something special, but they don't realize that if you lead a very pure life, a very Krishna conscious life, then you become very special, because there's very few that are doing that.
Those anarchas mentioned in the Madhurya Kadambini, they also kind of progress it. Sporadic endeavor, the false enthusiasm, and this is sporadic endeavor, and you try to do like an announcement the next day, and the Trangaranjini is the most subtle one, before you kind of like immediately it's coming to an end. So that's definitely a dangerous one. Interesting, I think it's the last one, or one of the last demons that Krishna killed in Vrindavan is Kesha. And Kesha demon also represents a great devotee, guru, preceptor, teacher. So that's also
Yes, we can see that from the you see. I mean, first of all, we just say to everybody, come along, chant Hare Krishna, and have some halava, Hari Bol, everything will be fine. And so it seems like it will be. And then as you go on, they say, by the way, did you know that this is something you're going to have to watch out for, and this is something you're going to have to do. And then you start realizing, okay, so now the territory is being charted out in front, and I have to navigate through that territory. There's a nice book by Shiva Maharaj that he's put together, Sankalpa Kamodi, and it's all about how to go from one vow to the next, one commitment to the next. It's a series of sankalpas on the way back to Godhead. So you go from one level, and then you have to know what's the next step. Not that I go 2 steps or 3 steps, just what's the next step. And that you don't take 1 step back as well, that you maintain what you have, and now, okay, what's the next step? And the only time you're safe, Srila Prabhupada said, is when you're in Krishna's arms. So there's always another step, until the step is to Krishna's arms. And when you're in Krishna's arms, then you can chill out.
So some other struggling, and then things are not going so well in your own spiritual life or in general, but if you start getting some success, external success, and whatever devotees with each other, that this is again when the pride creeps in, and it's a big test. So you see that this is Krishna's mercy. You just being used as an instrument.
You also, as you go on in the service, you can gain like mystical powers. Maybe you're not floating up the hill, but you just become more adept at being able to control the material energy, and so this can create a complacency.
To any extent, is this related with this? Is it the things sort of thing?
Yeah, well, the Mahatma was saying is really interesting. He was saying that Krishna was watching the gopis as they came out the water, and we want to do that. We want to be able to look and enjoy, and so in that way we're trying to be Krishna. So that's what the false ego is. When you say you want to be God, then that means you want to be the controller. Everything is there for your enjoyment, and it's your position. Bhuktaram Yogata Bhaisham, you're the enjoyer, you're the beneficiary, you're everyone's well-wishing friend, you're the cool guy, you're A-OK. That's really what it is, Whether it's a subtle or a gross So that's what God is. That's why we have such a clear understanding that when you say God, then everything that we've got, He's got the incomplete perfection, and we've got some kind of perverted, reflected kind of. So we can look at ourselves and think, well, I like this idea of being attractive to others and enjoying like that. So that's Krishna. Krishna showing us, well, this is how you do it. So don't compete with me. Just comply with me. So you can compete or you can comply. If you compete, then immediately anxiety will stop, because it's really going to be tough trying to compete with Krishna. You know, he's really, he's much more equipped than we are. You know, it's a futile attempt. So the best thing is to think, okay, I know that, I fully accept that with my intelligence. Now I need to align my emotions with this so that it goes from the head into the heart, so that I'm not just philosophically accepting it, but I'm living it, you know. And then you become a real devotee when you're able to align the way you feel with the way you think. It's an interesting book by Mahatma Prabhu. It's called Uplift Yourself and Change the World. And he says, you may be surprised to know, but if you did a video of yourself for 24 hours, or at least when you were awake anyway, and you looked at yourself, you'd be really surprised to see that a lot of the things that you believe, you don't act upon. Like you may believe that it's that you should be really polite and really nice to people, and you believe it. And so because you believe that, you think, well, because I'm totally 100% into being polite and nice to people, well, obviously I must be polite and I must be nice. So when someone says you're rude, I don't know what their problem is. I'm a nice, polite person, you know, because you believe that. But it's not necessarily that that's what your acts. He said most of our acts do not reflect our beliefs. Most of them. So that's a bit heavy, eh? But when you're able to believe and then act in the way that your beliefs, you know, we all believe it's right to be humble. You know, we all say in the morning and be more tolerant and ready to offer all respect to others. But it's a point to actually just spontaneously be like that, you know. So that's the challenge. So you have to be a little bit patient with yourself as well, that you're not maybe changing as quickly as you would like to, or you thought you were better than you are, and that's self-realization, is starting to realize what your predicament is in the material world, how you're affected, how you're conditioned, and if you push on with the daily things, if you're going around a race course on a horse, and there's 4 fences as you're going around. First thing when you get up in the morning is the 4 fences. You get up in the morning and it's no illicit sex, no intoxication, no eating meat, no gambling. So you think, okay, I won't be doing those today. So you get over the first 4 fences, and then there's Mangalati, that's the 5th fence. Then there's 16 rounds. And then you get into the routine after a while, and you just start going over the fences, and it's fine, you can do this. And then every now and again you'll see a mountain range, and you think, I just can't get over that mountain. And as it's getting closer, it's becoming more and more formidable. And then as you get really close, you see that the mountain is painted on a canvas, and you just go clean through. You just keep going over the things that you can do, getting up in the morning, chanting your rounds, following the regs, doing some service. And then you start to disregard what seems insurmountable and formidable. You just keep doing what you can do. And eventually you'll start to be able to do the things that you can't do. Just by keeping a regular spiritual practice, you will overcome everything. But if you don't, if you allow the things you can't do to stop you doing the things that you can do, then you'll never mind not be able to do the things that you can't do. You won't even be able to do the things that you can do. So and Srila Prabhupada saying, we can all do this. We can all be Krishna conscious. We can all become pure devotees. We can go back to Godhead in this lifetime. He's telling us that we can do that. And if we believe that we can do that, then that's it. Then all we have to do then is align with that, so that our acts are reflecting what our beliefs are. They're interesting things, beliefs, because we have a lot of beliefs that just slip in without us even realizing it, We may believe it's good to chant Japa in the morning, and so we're just about to chant our Japa at the end of the day, had a busy day, and we've got 8 rounds left. And then the belief comes in, these are going to be useless. Absolutely useless. You didn't chant them in the morning. So because you so much believe that that's the case, but you can change your beliefs. You can decide, no, I've done a whole day's service, I'm purified now, I'm feeling humble. These are going to be the best rounds I've ever chanted. And you can change your beliefs around. You can make it so that all your beliefs are for you, are useful for you. And you can renounce all the beliefs that are working against you. Any beliefs that are going to discourage you or reduce your enthusiasm to practice devotional service, they need to be discarded, just kicked out. Anartha nivritti, it's an unwanted thing. We want encouragement, we want to be optimistic, we want to be our best friend, we want to show ourselves self-love and encouragement. And it may be that if we don't encourage ourselves, that nobody else will. So we have to learn how to do that. Any beliefs that are making you feel negative or discouraging, you have to just discard them and find a belief that's positive. Yeah.
So, I really saying how, when if you come up with criticism for somebody else, and it's good to reflect on yourself.
Yeah.
And to come up with criticism for yourself.
Yeah.
And I definitely how you balance that with also not discouraging yourself from being able to advance. How can you keep critical of yourself without putting yourself down?
Yeah, that's why we avoid emotions like guilt. We may do something really bad, and then this just came up last night. Actually, we had to talk about guilt in this course we're doing with Mahatma. So it was, this particular subject was, how do you deal with guilt? So the problem with guilt is we repress it. We may find we have some fault, and then we feel so bad about that. We think, oh, I'm going to be so discouraged. No, don't go there. Just desensitize yourself and just get on with it, And that may seem to work, but then what happens is the pain that we've repressed, eventually when it comes up, it's even stronger. But if you allow yourself to fully experience how bad that is, then you don't want to do it again, because you don't want to feel like that again. And there's a nice example of about a woman in emotional intelligence. She'd been married to a man for 17 years, and he just left her. And so she was really surprised and really shocked. And anyway, she carried on, and then she was telling a friend about 2 months later. She says, yeah, he's left, and I haven't got a problem with it at all, actually. And she said, do you know, in all those 2 months, I haven't shed one tear. And as soon as she said that, she burst into tears. And she was really, really sad, and really unhappy. But because of her pride, she didn't want to admit how much he'd hurt her by doing that to her, you see. So that emotion got pushed right down. But then when it did come up, it was very, very intense. So the problem with not looking at your faults because you're worried you're going to be discouraged, so you push down that feeling, that emotion, because then it seems to be, well, now I'll be enthusiastic and I won't be discouraged. So you push it down, and it just sits there and it festers. And at some point, it comes up, and then it's very intense, kind of catches you off guard, So better to just take the bull by the horns and think, I messed up. That was so bad. Okay. And then I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to make sure that doesn't happen. I'm going to rectify it. I'm going to conduct myself in such a way, avoid this, avoid that, and be like this and be like that. And then it's good. Then you've bounced back. You've saw the fault, and you're going ahead now a little bit more wiser and a little bit more determined than you were before. See, faults are like failures, and If you fail over and over again, it doesn't actually mean you're a failure. It's only when you discontinue the process, when you decide to give up, at that point, you can get your official I'm a failure badge. Okay, have you given up now? Yeah, okay, we'll give you the badge. Now you can actually tell people you are a genuine 100% failure. But if you don't give up, then you're just a success in progress. No matter how many times it goes wrong, oh my God, I should have. Oh. And then you get up and you try again, and you try again. And then success is just getting up that one more time after you failed. Sooner or later you'll succeed. As long as you don't give up. Okay, I'll finish there. Iskon Guru in the key. Shila Prabhupada ki. Nitai Gaura Premanandi.